First up, we have the band Horndal with Head Hammer Man. This third album from the Stockholm Swedish band is something that is on the very extreme of a lot of different things. It is very much in the sludge metal category, but you can hear a little bit of death metal in here, you can hear a little bit of post-rock going on, a little bit of atmospheric moments going on as well. Imagine a weird conglomeration of bands like Mastodon and Burst, also a little bit of I Hate God, which is quite surprising to me on here, but it really is a great sludge metal album that hits a lot of great peaks and valleys. This is my first run with the band, but I'm very much enjoying what I hear, and you just might as well give them a shot if it seems like it might be up your alley. Next up, we have Ingested with The Tide of Death and Fractured Dreams. I've been following this band pretty much since I started doing reviews and interviews all the ways back in 2011, and I heard this band for the first time really doing their blend of brutal death metal and slam, and it's amazing to see what they've done over the years, and this album is a great example of what they can do. Of course, it's got all that slam and brutal death metal that you imagine. Vocal gymnastics are throughout this entire album, but they also add a lot of peaks and valleys to this album that you may not necessarily expect. There's some great melodies and harmonies throughout all of the chaos that's going on here, which makes it a much more intriguing listen than just flat out brutal death metal and slam. Those aren't necessarily my favorite genres, but when they're done with something like this, it grabs my attention. And hey, it just might grab your attention as well, even if you're not a fan. Up next is Ischemic with Condemned to the Broken Wheel. This is a fascinating display of blackened doom metal, where they really hit the territories of that death, doom, almost gothic doom style, but they combine it with that fast-paced, ultra-speed black metal, which is really pulverizing and also feels like it kind of throws you back and forth, but it's quite the intriguing journey. I know this won't be for everybody, but if you like blackened doom, this is a very, very fine example of this. This is my first run with the band, and I am highly, highly impressed with what this Canadian band can do, and I need to go back and check out their previous albums to see how it holds up. But until then, there hasn't been a lot of Black and Doom albums in 2024, so you might want to give this one a shot. Next, we got Korpiklani with their brand new album, Rankarumpu. And it's so great to see this band back. Even though they just had an album out in 2021, it's great to see that fun folk metal side coming back in 2024, because this is a dark, bleak year, and we could really use some fun to try to get our minds off of everything that's going on. Of course, Korpiklani has never really done anything out of the ordinary with their sound. They've always been fun folk metal that just aspires everyone to drink, dance, and party. Olli Venska of Turisas makes his debut on this album, playing violin to the best of his abilities, and really adds that special something to Korpiklani as well. It's great to see that they're touring North America and around the world right now, and I can't wait to see what's next. Korpiklani is always a great time. First, we got The Absence with their self-titled album. I've been a huge fan of these guys since the early 2010s, and it's great to see them continuing on the way that they have. Of course, there's been a lot of highs and lows, and they haven't always been putting out stuff, but whenever they do, it's always quality. And with The Absence, you never exactly know what direction they're going to be going into, besides the fact it's going to be very melodic death metal. And that's what you get with the self-titled album. I will say this is probably one of the most raw albums the band has put out. The production is not pristine, it is raw and gritty, but it really matches the tone of the album, the tone of the lyrics, and of course the musicianship going on. If you're looking for that 90s, early 90s melodeath sound, The Absence pulled it off perfectly here with their self-titled album, and if you need that in 2024, I highly recommend this album. Next up is the band Argyle with Spleen Angel, the third album of their trilogy from the side project of Misanthrope, the French progressive melodic death metal band, and this is some of the most abstract stuff the band has done to date, but it all does come together. It is very much in the death doom category, but they also go into more experimental and avant-garde places. They add things like thrash metal and brutal death in here. They also go into more atmospheric territory, clean vocals in very distinct places. It goes all over the map, but it fits the story, it fits the trilogy, and it fits the band so perfectly. If you want something a little more abstract in your death doom, I recommend checking out the first two albums as well too, and of course Spleen Angel. This is the final album, taking place over 22 years since this band incepted, and I think they nailed it for the end. Next up, we go back to Sweden with the band Child, with the album, I'm amazed I'm actually going to be swearing during this, Shitgeist. The sophomore album from this band really explores the territories of death metal and grindcore, but they also go into some very melodic moments that I did not expect. This is a brutal album, don't get me wrong, but there are some moments where they let up on that brutality and some things really shine through before the chaos ensues once again. This is a short album, 11 tracks, 24 minutes. Seems to be a running theme with some albums that I've been covering this year, but then again, it's all killer and no filler. If you're looking for something that really amps up that grindcore death metal and the odd melodic moments, check this one out. Next up, we have the band Suffer with Grand Canvas of the Aesthete, another band that has come out in 2024 who started off in the late 80s, early 90s, really became more prolific in the 2020s. Look at Morbid Saints and many other bands that have done that over the last couple years. Suffer has come back since their debut album in 2015 here in 2024, and it's just that classic old school death metal sound that you want. It's Americanized just enough, but of course it does have that great HM2 pedal that is done by so much of that classic European death metal sound. It's that grand conglomeration of it all. No frills, no antics, just pure, unadulterated, old school death metal. And if that's what you want, Suffer brings that in strides. So give this one a shot if that's what you're looking for. Up next, we have Waitalati with their debut album, Celestial Shrine. This is a debut album featuring the singer of White Ward, doing some Ukrainian progressive folk, death, black, so many different styles going on here, but it all makes sense when you listen to the music. When you first hear it, you might be a little thrown off because it does kind of go bonkers in a little places, but the more that you listen to it and the more that you really encapsulate yourself with the music, all of it starts to make so much sense, and you wonder how you went on without it. This is some fantastic stuff, and it's great to see Ukraine being able to continue to make some amazing music here in 2024. And considering this is just a debut album featuring some key members in the Ukrainian metal scene, I'm so curious about what's gonna come next. And finally today we have Wrist Meet Razor with Degeneration. This is another album that just goes absolutely bonkers in all the craziest ways. It hits power violence, it hits noise, it hits post-hardcore, it hits emo rock, and it hits everything in between. This album is an absolute bluster of an album, and you just never know what direction it's entirely going to be going into, but what a ride it really is. The lyrical concepts really hit home. The production on this album is fantastic considering everything that they have to accomplish on this album, and if this is what it sounds like on the record, I can only imagine what it sounds like when you hear it live. This album is absolutely insane, and if you're looking for something a bit more on the emo side of the extreme metal side, give this. First up is Hypersonic with Chaos Magnia. I really enjoy what's going on here. It feels like a really good blend of some dark metal, some symphonic power metal, gets a little bit into the symphonic and gothic death metal territories as well, especially when you have guests like Mark Jensen being able to show off his magnificent voice. This covers so much ground of what I love in this particular style, and it's great to see this band back as this is their first album in 8 years. It's so great to see them back, and I really hope that they stick around and the next album won't take so long, but until then, it proves that quality always beats out quantity. Next up, we have Martico with Acida. At least, I hope that's how you pronounce both of those names. But what I can say is this sophomore album rules. It combines what I love about doom metal, sludge metal, and yeah, even some atmospheric black metal going on here into some great distorted, disjointed moments that flow together so perfectly. It feels like a paradox, but it works so very, very well. I love the vocal delivery on this album. I love the atmosphere of this album. The production is top-notch for the style, raw but not too crystal clear. It's just got everything that I'm looking for. And if you're looking for something on that heavier side, you really should give this one a shot. Up next, we have the sophomore album from Mother of All with Global Parasitic Leviathan. This is some fantastic melodeath here that is not in your really traditional melodeath of what things have become, especially in the 21st century. This thing is much faster, much thrashier, and kind of goes off the walls a little bit, and I really appreciate that. You got the speeds here that really, really work in the band's favor, and you can really tell that this is a post-pandemic album. I mean, just read between the lines. But also, along with all of that, the musicianship is just amazing on this album. I really appreciate the more raw approach of the production on this album, and yeah, this album definitely feels like that anger from the heart. And if you feel that as well, and if you want some more intensity in your melodic death metal, next up is Set Your Sails with Bad Blood. I have heard about this band ever since they formed in 2018, and never really checked them out until this album, but I'm so glad that I finally gave them a shot, as they are doing magnificent German pop-infused metal, and it's just so much fun to listen to. You got all the modern tropes that are going on. Everything is just super, super catchy. The vocals are just pristine on this album, especially for what you're looking for on here. Whether it gets more intense, whether it gets super catchy, it's just got everything that you're looking for here. And if you like bands like Dead by April or Electric Callboy, you need to check out a band like Set Your Sails, because I think this could be something that would be right up your alley. Just some good, fun, modern metal. What more could you want? Next up, we have the legendary folk metal band Tyr with Battle Ballads. Now, it's been quite a number of years since the last Tyr album, and I'm so glad to see the band back, and they're striving to make some of the best material the band has ever done. Despite the title, it is not an album full of ballads. That would be weird to think Tyr would do something like that. These are war anthems. While it does get slower in some points, it is either mid-tempo stompers or the kind of music you go out to battle towards. This fast, super fun, it's everything that you look for in a Tyr album. And I'm glad to see them directing the ship back in this direction, because this is the Tyr that I love. And it's just great to see that Tyr is back having fun as well. You can just hear it. They're out on tour in North America right now, if they're coming by you. Next up, we have Veritaris with The Dark Horizon. And this Seattle band feels like they were plucked right out of a snowstorm, deep in the heart of a Finnish forest. Yet, they're from America, and that's insane to me, considering all the things given. This is pure blackened melodeath, and I love it for it. Like, you hear the tropes of melodic death metal going on here, a bit more eerie, a bit more sinister, but you also have more black metal style vocals going on. You have more that was black metal keys and orchestration going on. It's a great combination, and it's great to see that coming out of America as well. It should not work on paper, but it really, really does. And if you're looking for a nice concoction like this, I implore you to check this thing out. It is fantastic stuff. Next up, we have Veritaris with The Dark Horizon. And this Seattle band feels like they were plucked right out of a snowstorm, deep in the heart of a Finnish forest. Yet, they're from America, and that's insane to me, considering all the things given. This is pure blackened melodeath, and I love it for it. Like, you hear the tropes of melodic death metal going on here, a bit more eerie, a bit more sinister, but you also have more black metal style vocals going on. You have more that was black metal keys and orchestration going on. It's a great combination, and it's great to see that coming out of America as well. It's like some odd mix of like mixing Watain and the Black Dahlia murder combined. It should not work on paper, but it really, really does. And if you're looking for a nice concoction like this, I implore you to check this thing out. It is fantastic stuff. Next up is Austere with Beneath the Threshold. Again, it's great to see this band back in less than a year, just a couple weeks shy of a full year since their previous album. And of course, if you know anything about Austere, you know that this is some of the darkest, deepest, depressive black metal out there. And I also appreciate the fact that they actually know how to use good production when they make this kind of style of black metal, because that's not always the case. But when it comes to Austere, the vocals are just heart-wrenching. The lyrics are too relatable for someone of my mental health capacity, and the music just matches up with everything perfectly. This is a fantastic display of how to do depressive black metal and not sound like crap, and I've always appreciated that about the band. And will they wait less than a year to put out another album, or are they going to take their time next time? Let's find out. Next up, we have the debut album from this mellow black band known as Crimson Blade with Indeterminatus. This thing is so cool to me. It has a little bit of melodeath going on there, but it is more of a pure mellow black album. Imagine some weird conglomeration of Watain and the Black Dahlia Murder. It should not work, but it works so very, very well. It's dark, it's evil, it has everything that you're looking for if you want some melodic black metal, with just hints of a little more thrash and melodeath moments at times. This is just the debut album, and I'm so excited to see what's going to be coming up next for the band, because if they're already pulling this off, the sky is the limit for Crimson Blade. Next up is the debut album from Demon Slot 666 with Endless Witchcraft. This is a Chinese blackened speed metal band. Yeah, you heard that right. And I'm very impressed by it. Seriously, if you love the likes of Midnight and Toxic Holocaust, Demon Slot 666 is going to be right up your alley. The songs are insane, it's got that great black and roll, black and speed metal sound behind it, and hey, if you really love those early day Possessed albums, the rototom fills that happen throughout the entire album, mwah. I just love it. This thing rules. And if you are any kind of blackened speed metal fan, you need to check this out. Next up is Destroyer of Light with Degradation Years. I feel like I've checked this band out before, but I completely forgot all about them. Then I heard this record, and I love what I'm hearing here, but it is so strange to me. I mean, it's got everything that I should love about it. It's got doom metal, it's got some alternative metal kind of stuff going on, it's got hard rock, it's super catchy. Despite it being doom, it is super catchy. But just imagine this. Imagine if Helmet wrote doom metal. I know, that seems kind of weird, right? But that's what Destroyer of Light sounds like to me. It's got the hard rock and alternative metal that you would expect from someone like Helmet, but done through a doom metal filter. It is so strange on paper, but so good in execution. And I hope more people check this out. All clean vocals, pristine production, fantastic stuff here. Destroyer of Light, you got my blessing. Next up is Gone Till Winter with Hiding from the Sun. While the band has put out a lot of EPs, demos, and even a compilation, this is the band's official first LP, and I really dig this. It feels like a very gothic alternative metal, but also almost power metal album and band. And it's so intriguing to me, and I love what's going on here. It kind of feels like a mixture of like Pagan's Mind and Evergrey, and one band that you need to check out that I talked about last year called Abandon All. Mix all those bands together and you get something really, really cool here. It feels like hard rock and power metal and gothic and dark metal all combined together to create something that's very, very catchy with amazing musicianship. And if that sounds like something that could be up your alley, I think it will be. First up, we have the band In Vain with Solemn. And yeah, I might as well just be honest with you. This is in my top 2 albums of 2024 so far, along with Scale. This album is absolutely incredible. I've been a huge fan of this band since their debut album back in 2007, and just seeing all the progressive changes that they've made over the years, while still sounding like themselves. On this album, you absolutely hear that progressive death metal sound. You hear more of those really rich, clean vocals that they've really been incorporating over the last couple albums, which is a very nice touch. And also being able to experiment a little bit more, having some more saxophone, having some more genre bending, being able to do some left turns while being able to course right with the ship is just absolutely incredible. Match that up with awesome production and you have one of the best albums of 2024. Mark my words. Next up, we have My Dying Bride with A Mortal Binding, and this is one of the most monumental and colossal doom metal albums that will be coming out in 2024. This is pure classic My Dying Bride, but updated just enough for 2024. It doesn't feel like a retread of what they were doing in the 90s and the 2000s. It doesn't sound like what they've been doing over the last couple albums. It's kind of a mixture of both. You can hear some of those great quality death metal elements that they really used to harken on back in the day, but you really hear the gothic sound coming through just as much. It's a great, fantastic balance, and I'm so happy to see that Aaron Stainthorpe and company are going just as strong as ever. My Dying Bride is one of my favorite doom bands of all time, and this album lives up to absolutely all of the hype. Next up is Nocturna with Of Sorcery and Darkness. The sophomore album from this Italian power metal symphonic band is just absolutely incredible work, which I expect no less from Italy because, especially in 2024, they have proven to be one of the strongest genres of the year, at least in my humble opinion. With this being their sophomore album, they were able to refine everything and make this album even superior to their debut, which I thought was some fantastic stuff. The songs are catchier, it gets heavier when it needs to, it's got the great catchy moments that you would expect in a style like this, amazing musicianship from across the board, and yeah, just one of the best symphonic power metal albums that you're going to hear with just that little bit of tinge of gothic metal to satisfy those that are into the darkness. This album rules. Go check it out. Next up, we have Tomorrow's Rain with Ovdan. This is absolutely phenomenal gothic death doom, and it's that way in every sense of the word, and especially with everything that's going on in their world right now in Tel Aviv. Yeah, this one's pretty poignant. Also featuring some guest spots from members of Dark Funeral Mayhem and even old school Merciful Fate. This album absolutely shines. It's so dark though, but those moments that you kind of see through the darkness make up for everything. It's so dark and gloomy as well, which is really that great atmosphere for the style, but it just feels darker, heavier, and shines through so much more. Loving what this band has done since their debut album a few years ago, and I can't wait to see what's next. Up next is the Irish metal band Ora with Maelstrom. This is an excellent combination of how to do old school metalcore with just the right amount of sludge and progressive metal elements to make it really, really dark. I like what's going on here. It has the throwbacks that I appreciate, and they're not trying to be a poppy, catchy band. They're writing some really dark, heavy stuff here. The name shows it off. Maelstrom shows it off, and just everything about this album just matches the intensity of metal, hardcore, sludge, and prog, like I mentioned. So much great stuff going on here, especially for a debut album, and I can't wait to see what's next. Up next is Vadenplas with the Empyrean Equation of the Lost Things. This album is pure, unadulterated progressive metal, with just the slightest hints of classic heavy metal and power metal thrown in. So, in other words, it's classic Vadenplas. This band has always been a killer band, and this is the first non-concept album they've done in well over a decade. Just a great collection of songs, 6 tracks, a couple epics thrown in there as well, but if you're looking for that old school Dream Theater sound, a little bit of Symphony X, the tiniest bit of Evergrey, some Fates Warning, and that early new wave of British heavy metal sound, kind of mixed in all together with that German progressive metal sound, you can't do better than Vadenplas. Up next is Verikalpa with Tumio. This is fantastic folk metal, and April has been an extravagant month for folk metal. You've had Tyr, you've had Korpiklani, and now Verikalpa. This is more of the traditional heavy folk metal stuff going on. Not to say that it's not fun, not to say that it's not danceable, drinkable, and something that you want to see in a live setting, but it is heavier, kind of more of that Insiferum side of folk metal, if you will. But this is fantastic stuff from start to finish, and the band just gets more consistent and refines everything better and better with every album. And the fact that they have had 4 albums in 6 years is just mind-blowing, showing that their consistency is not lost. Fantastic stuff, and if you need some folk metal from this month, check this one out. First up is Ben Sinister with Mostly Great Things. And do I make the obvious joke here? I think I have to make the obvious joke. It's mostly great album. I'm joking, of course. The whole album is great from start to finish. If you've never checked out Ben Sinister before, think of like indie rock, hard rock, classic rock, and the slightest tinges of prog, whether they want to admit it or not, are shining through this entire album, and have always shined through pretty much out the entire band. I really caught into this band with their album Animals, and it's so great to see over the years that they're still making the music that they want to make. It's fun, it's catchy, it makes you think, and very stylized. And if you're looking for something that's not brutal death metal or grindcore like I usually cover on this channel, you need to check out something like Ben Sinister. It is a great palate cleanser for any metal fan. Up next is Benighted with Ekbom, and their 10th album is easily the most brutal album the band has put out to date. It's just that perfect brutal death metal and grindcore mixed together. And of course, especially what they've been doing over the last few albums, they've been adding in some more slam moments in here, so of course you're going to hear those moments going on there occasionally, but not always. So if that is kind of a turn-off, I understand, but I think the music more than justifies it being there. With excellent production and songwriting, it is not just standard blast beats and fretboard Olympics. There's something to be said on this album, and it's quite the dark, brutal experience. So if that's what you need, Benighted just absolutely knocked it out of the park on this one. Up next is Judgment Fire with Kingdom of Skyscrapers. This is the 3rd album in 15 months from this Swedish band, and I absolutely love what's going on here. It's so fantastic the way that they're able to be a goth metal band and be a melodeath band at the same time. And at least on this particular album, they seem to separate those styles. The gothic songs are a bit more of the mainstream appeal, super catchy stuff, and of course those clean vocals. The melodeath side is a little faster, sometimes a little thrashier, and of course the screams and growls that go along with that. It almost kind of feels like 2 EPs mixed together, but I do appreciate the fact that whether you love the gothic clean side or the heavier melodeath side, half of the album is at least for you. And I'm definitely going to be going back and checking out those other 2 albums, because if this is what they did, I want to see where they came to at this point, and I'm so excited about the future. Up next is the debut album from Litchfield with The Maze, and this is some superior goth metal going on here. It almost gets into the death metal territory on here. There are some moments on here that are absolutely crushing, but this is a goth album through and through. The vocals are so sorrowful and just agonizing in the best way possible. This is the kind of goth metal that you go to if you are a metal fan. You want something heavier, kind of like in the Paradise Lost kind of feel, but a completely different style of vocal technique, and of course vibrato. But this album simply rules from start to finish, and I'm so glad I discovered it. For all my goth fans out there, you need to check this one out. Next up is Synthetic Sentience with Aeon of the Machine. This debut album is absolutely bonkers. I've been trying to figure out how to describe this album. It's progressive metal, it's brutal death metal, it's almost power metal, and industrial all combined together. So imagine something kind of like Fear Factory meets Hate Eternal meets Cybreed meets some of the wackiness of Dragon Force. I know that sounds weird, but seriously, give this one a shot if you think it might be up your alley, because there's some absolutely talented work going on here. Even if the drums do sound like they're programmed, they are real. And of course done by Kevin Talley, one of the best session drummers out there. This album rules. And if you want that fast, heavy, machine gun, robotic-like metal, you can't get any better than this. Next up is Spit on Your Grave with Arcanum. This is pure, unadulterated Mexican death metal. Of course, you'll hear brutal classic elements from something like Obituary or Cannibal Corpse, but you also hear some hardcore elements in there sometimes, brutal breakdowns, and of course, if you couldn't tell by the name of the band, they're very horror influenced, and it's some great stuff to hear, especially with something as legendary as the movie that they named themselves after. This is 8 songs, 30.5 minutes, and I can't imagine any death metal fan who loves the old school mixed in with some hardcore stuff, I can't imagine how they'd be disappointed in an album like this. This is just top tier when it comes to that really heavy metal. And finally, we have Vulture with Sentinels. This is the 4th album from this German band, and they really do live up to the name, Vulture. It's fast, it's speedy, it's that great speed heavy metal, classic heavy metal, revival metal sound, and the occasional shrieks and screams that does sound like a vulture that's about to swoop in and take its prey. Mix that all together and you have some very fascinating and very enjoyable revival metal going on here. Everything that you could imagine from the genre, which has no subpar bands in it that at least that I'm aware of. And Vulture is just a shining light in that genre. This is just a fun album to listen to from start to finish, and if you love that sound, you're gonna love this album. First up is ACXDC with GOAT. I'm gonna keep this one short and sweet. This is an LA band that covers all the ground of power violence, grindcore, hardcore, and all of the violent genres that you can imagine. All with their little tongue-in-cheek style. This is the pure definition of what this kind of band is all about. 17 songs, 23 minutes long. What more could you possibly ask for in a power violence band? Up next is Amiensis with Reclamation Part 1. While this band is spread out across the United States now, I will always consider them to be, first and foremost, a Minnesota band. And between them and Panopticon, we're sitting pretty nice when it comes to Minnesota black metal. Although in the case of Amiensis, they started off with more traditional black metal, more black gaze kind of stuff later, but then they really found their niche when it comes into progressive black metal with a little hints of folk metal thrown in between. That American style folk metal, which I really appreciate. This band just does it so very well. And it's just awesome to see the growth this band has taken. And now that they're behind a label like M Theory, I think they might be actually able to make it to the stratosphere. I can really only hope so, because this is one of my favorite black metal releases of 2024 so far, and I can't imagine much else is going to take over that place. Up next is Inter Arma with New Heaven, and wow! Maybe I'm missing out on something over the course of the last couple albums, but the band has really taken a left turn over the years. Gone are the days of that sludgy doom metal sound, especially on something like my favorite release from them, The Cavern. This album is like Primitive Man. It is dark, it is evil, it is brutal, all the extremes. While it still has some of the doom sound that you know them for, they're really exploring things that you haven't heard on previous albums, like blast beats and the tremolo picking, and so much more that goes into their sound that just sounds absolutely shocking to me. I like this style. It's a bit of a course correction, I almost feel like. It feels very strange. But with all of that said, if you're looking for something on the more extreme end of things, check out the brand new album from Inter Arma. Next up is Stormborn with Zenith. This is the sophomore album from the band and also the reformation of the band as well, with a brand new singer, and it's great to see the band coming back, as I really did enjoy their debut album, but Zenith is so much better. I love the position that they're in right now. It's just that perfect blend of heavy metal, revival metal, power metal, and do I hear an occasional growl or two, at least in the background? Yes, I do. I really like what's going on here. It's fun, it reminds you of those classic times. Sometimes it has like a Maiden or Judas Priest feel behind it. Sometimes it's more of a Halloween kind of feel. But all through and through, it is Stormborn. And I really enjoy what they're doing here. And if you're looking for that classic fix of revival metal, power metal, yeah, pick this one up. Next up, we have This Ending with Crowned in Blood. It even says on their page that they want to do melodic death metal done right, and I couldn't agree more. With their 5th album, they really are doing melodeath right. This is everything I love about the genre. While it doesn't go for like the super poppy, catchy choruses like you would hear in something like Dark Tranquillity or In Flames, it is much more along the lines of like Carcass or At the Gates, all of course mixed in with their own nuances. It is super, super melodic in the right moments, but it is so intense and brutal at the same time. This is the kind of stuff that I love about melodeath that isn't just trying to focus on the pop end of things. This is fantastic stuff and one of the best melodeath albums of the year so far, and probably of all of 2024. And finally, for brand new albums that come out today is Vesperian Sorrow with Awaken the Grey Light. Going all the way back to LA once again. This band is exactly what I look for when it comes to symphonic black metal. And it has been ever since I discovered them back in 2011, 2012, something like that. I've been a huge fan of them ever since. It is just that perfect combination of bands that I'm looking for, like Keep of Calcium, Cradle of Filth, Dimmu Borgir, even Opera 9. There's so much to really appreciate about a band like this that really knows how to incorporate those screams and cleans, the over-the-top black metal sound, symphonic elements in all the right moments, and just that pure, unadulterated black metal sound. It's just everything that I'm looking for. And you might enjoy it as well too if you've never checked them out before. Seriously, if you like your symphonic black metal, you need to give Vesperian Sorrow a shot. First up is the sophomore album from Folterkammer with Weibermacht. And if you want that in English, that means torture chamber with the brand new album Female Power. And I think that's an excellent way to describe this album. Vocals, female-led, are so extravagant, from the highest of high sopranos to the lowest of lows, with the growls and screams and everything in between. And the music in between is absolutely bonkers. For those that enjoy this kind of music, yeah, it feels like classical music. It feels like chamber music. It feels like all of this put through a black metal band. And for those that won't like it, it really does feel like you're in a torture chamber, so it's a win-win. Everything that started happening from the debut album comes into play on the second album, but it expands even further. The black metal is more evident, the other experimental avant-garde elements are there in full spades, and it just feels like a richer, fuller experience. And if you're down with some avant-garde, symphonic, chamber, black metal music, you can't really do much better. Next up is Fractal Gates with One with Dawn, and this is the perfect example of progressive death metal and metal death put together in perfect harmony. You can hear elements even as far back as Edge of Sanity, and also mix them in with more modern day melodeath with like Omnium Gatherum. You mix those two together and you have something that is technical in the right spots, atmospheric in the right spots, super melodic throughout, and just one of the finest albums in metal in 2024. Although it's been quite a bit of time since their previous album, they prove it's all about quality, not quantity. Next up is Labyrinthus Stellarum with Vortex of the Worlds. I have to thank the Harsh Vocals podcast for bringing this to my attention. Justin, Christian, nice find. Yes, this feels like cosmic, trance, and black metal mixed together in this very atmospheric, partially raw but still very clear style that just has this kind of new age black metal kind of feel. It feels like you're lost in the midst of outer space without a planet in sight. It's a deep, dark void. Yeah, like they pointed out on the Harsh Vocals podcast, like, where else is there to explore besides the bottom of the ocean or outer space? Both of those are filled with terror, so it works perfectly for black metal. I really love what this band is doing, and considering this is just their sophomore album, I'm so curious where the band's going to be going from here. But it's absolutely fantastic stuff, and if you want something a little bit different in your black metal, give this one a shot. Coming up next is Los Vostok with Opus Fero 2, Mark of the Beast. This is the pure definition of extreme progressive metal, because it can go from the poppiest of poppy moments to some of the most extreme death metal and black metal moments that you can imagine, all while still being very much a prog metal band. Teddy Moeller and company are doing fantastic work with this. It's an excellent part 2 to the part 1 that came out just a few years ago, but the band feels so much more focused on this album. It feels catchier, it feels heavier, the production is just phenomenal. Everything is going in the right way for this band, and I've been a fan with them ever since I started doing interviews and reviews under the name That Drummer Guy. So this band is very near and dear to me, and it's so great to see them come out with some brand new material in 2024. Up next is Oak, Ash, and Thorn with Our Grief Is Thus, the sophomore album from this Denver band, and it's some of the best music that they've put out so far. Love the debut album, but this one just hits home so much harder. I love the production so much on this album. The musicianship went from really good to really good on this album. The vocal melodies and harmonies are absolutely insane. Be it sung, be it screamed or growled, it just works perfectly. The drumming on this album from Sierra White is impeccable. I love it so much and it inspires me to get behind the kids. I'd love to get back on it one day. But all of that said, this is just the amazing way of making North American folk metal work. It has that folk metal sound, some North American influences, some traditional folk elements, and it just works perfectly from start to finish. This is a band that you need to know about if you like your extreme metal with a little bit of a folk side. And finally today we have Volk with 4. And wouldn't you know it, this is the 4th album from the band in 4 years. Absolutely insane stuff here, starting in the midst of the global pandemic and pretty much releasing an album every year since. I love what this band is doing here on 4. And I really want to check out what they did on the previous 3 albums. What's going on here is insane with their style of mellow black. It is hard-hitting, very cryptic, and a good look at the state of the world in 2024, and of course everything in the world around us. You match that up with some of the best melodic black metal I've heard in a very long time, and some excelled production, mixing and mastering, and part of all of that. Sign me up, this is my kind of stuff. And if you're looking for something on that melodic black metal side, you need to give Volk a chance, because this stuff is absolutely insane and I'm so glad I discovered him. Now I'll have to check out the previous 3 albums.